Greetings and welcome to the Dream Syndicate. In today's video, I'll show you how to make a posable hand that you can use for art dolls or even stop motion animation. So let's get crafting. I'll put links to everything you'll need to make these posable hands in the description, but here's a quick inventory of the supplies you'll need. It's helpful having a small cutting mat. This one's the size of your standard sheet of paper. Paper tape, a small gauge aluminum wire, slightly larger wire. The lower the gauge number, the thicker the wire is. Pliers, wire cutters, a little pipe cutter, cuticle scissors, an X-Acto knife and blades, measuring tape, a transparent ruler, aluminum tubing, and I'd also recommend a straight edge you can cut against, such as a metal ruler, and Sharpie markers also come in handy. We'll take a measurement of the character's arm and sort of guesstimate what looks good in relation to its proportions, and transfer that measurement onto the tubing for each hand. What we're making here is really the character's forearm to hand. Next, we'll use our pipe cutter. You turn the knob on the back to tighten it along the line we measured, and turn the tubing, which lets the blade cleanly slice through without crimping or denting it. Now we'll cut a 5 to 6 inch length of our thicker wire. This is going to form the hand. We'll make a loop, leaving an opening that's going to form the size of the hand and twist the rest of the wire. You could even make this a little bigger than you think you're going to want, because you can twist the loop part tighter and make it smaller, fine-tuning the size and the shape. If you want to join me in making imaginary reality, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon. We'll take a moment to check that our hands are fairly symmetrical. Here we'll use our paper tape, and first we're going to use it to sort of bulk out our wire and help it grip the inside of the aluminum tubing. We want the ends of the wire to fit in pretty snugly. Once our hand forms in the tube, we'll cut lengths of the thinner wire that will eventually become our posable fingers. I usually just measure from the tip of my middle finger to about the crook of my arm, but now I've had to think about and measure it. The wire is about 14 to 16 inches long. I usually start my finger placements by figuring out where the outermost fingers, the pinky and the thumb, should be located. You can use your pliers to help cinch the finger wire around the wire for the hand, and then creating a sort of broad U shape, winding your other end of the wire around. This is the start of our thumb. Next we'll create a pretty big loop. Wrap that around the hand wire. These pieces are the thumb and the index fingers currently joined together. Then I'll make another large loop and double some wire back over our U shape. This is going to help keep things in place later. While this sounds like ridiculous advice, make sure that you've created a mirrored set of hands, a right and a left. It's embarrassing how many times I've made two of the same side. And finally, tightly wind our finger wire around and snip it with our wire cutters. Take some time to refine the placement of our forefingers and thumb. Now we'll use strips of paper tape to tack our fingers into place, covering the wire to form the art doll's palms and back of hand. You want the length of paper tape to be able to more than double over the palm. We're basically trying to cover over the palm as efficiently as possible. Once we've got a good base layer of paper tape, we can begin to make the fingers. We'll mark off the length of the fingers. At this point it's better to leave them too long and go back and trim them than to cut them too short. You can keep some basic concepts in mind. Your pinky finger and thumb are about the same length. Your middle finger is the longest, with your ring finger a little shorter than that, and your index finger a little shorter still. Using the length of the fingers we created for the first hand, we can roughly transfer those measurements onto the opposite hand and go back and refine it. After our finger wires are cut to size, you can make a bunch of long, narrow strips of paper tape. You want them to be about 1.5 times as wide and well over twice as long as the finger wires. We'll attach it to our fingers wire, wrapping the edge around the wire lengthwise, the one side of the paper tape covering over itself. As you can see, I'm using my X-Acto blade to quickly mark off the finger's length and just sort of moving the base of where the finger joins the hand and cutting a bit more paper tape than what I measured. One moment I didn't manage to take footage of is wrapping a large strip around the aluminum tubing. You'll see a similar example of this a little later. You want this piece to be almost as long as your tubing and wide enough that it wraps over itself. You'll most likely want to make 2 layers on each finger with the long strips, and once that's done, you'll create strips that are a bit larger than twice as wide, but a little shorter than the finger's length, and wrap them around each finger. Once you get the hang of this technique, you might be able to make a new set of hands in about 2.5 hours, but while you're first learning how to make these posable hands, it might take you over 3 hours. Then we'll take larger strips and cover the remaining exposed parts of the hands. You'll see that some of the long strips from the fingers are being covered over, which is helping create a more natural look. As you place the strips, you want to make sure you're not leaving any weird divots, and the placement should sort of feel like it's going where it wants to go. The strip might not mirror itself on both sides of the hand. After some larger strips are placed, you'll wrap some smaller strips between each finger, and also use strips to bulk out that bubble of muscle connecting to the thumb and the smaller muscle that flows from your pinky. Here you can see a gap that was left. We'll just patch over areas like this. There really isn't a precise way to make these hands. Practically every time you place strips on a hand, it's going to be unique. You're just looking to give it a form that you like. One tip I can tell you is to find opportunities to use broader strips to give the hand a more realistic look, as it reduces the appearance of seams. If you use this technique, I'd love to check it out. You can tag me in the post so I can see your work. I like to place these really large strips toward the end that goes around most of the length of the hand and then can wrap around the aluminum tubing. Sometimes you might need to cut the strips so that the part that goes on the hand tapers. Our hand's nearly done, just a few more details to work on, but it's looking pretty solid. A round of applause! Now we'll take all of our hard work and throw it in a little bucket of water. Here we have some Mod Podge. We're basically going to be getting up to some half-assed paper mache. You want to have a beater brush, a brush that you treat terribly. I tend to use this brush only for applying Mod Podge. Taking the hands that have been soaked in the water for a few seconds, you'll take some fairly diluted Mod Podge and spread it all over, wanting it to seep into the paper tape. I'll even dunk it in some water after the Mod Podge application to try and get that first coat to really get absorbed into our hand. Then you'll use your beater brush to spread the glue around. It's super useful to have helping hands.
Stop it! Help!
What do you mean help? We are helping.
We're helping hands.
No, not like those. Well, they'd be pretty cool too, but in this instance I'm talking about these helping hands. They come in handy whenever you need to set something aside to dry. Once the hands dry, you can go back and patch any areas that look like they could use it. Now if you look at the tips of these fingers, they're kind of funky, too blunt and misshapen. You're going to take your cuticle scissors and trim away just a little bit of this excess material at a time. You can always trim more, but it's more patchwork if you trim away too much of the paper tape at once. And here's what our fingers look like after a trip to the tiny salon. Now we'll go ahead and add another coat of Mod Podge. This time we might make it a little less diluted, only mixing it with some water. You can then mix a base tone, a color that's going to look good if it shows through whatever flesh tone you're painting, with Mod Podge and some water so this pigment will permeate the hand color. For instance, if you're painting a character with peach colored skin, you might use a red base tone. When that layer is dry, the hand build's done, and you can paint whatever flesh tones you like. It's a good idea to do this painting while you're painting other flesh areas of your art doll or stop motion puppet, so you don't have to go back and try to color match after the fact. With this art doll hand building technique, you can create all kinds of different hands for your characters. This pointy fingered hand was created by wrapping the ends of the fingers with paper tape such that they would taper into claw-like shapes. These more literal looking claws are bits of plumber's epoxy carefully sculpted into claw forms, and then you would just make your hands per this tutorial. If you're looking for additional posable hand resources, the top video is another tutorial along with other research and trial and error. It helped me get started on the technique that I now use. Thanks so much for watching. If you want to join me in making imaginary reality, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon. Until next time, make believe.